A little boy accidentally falls in front of a fancy car. The daughter inside doesn't bother to check on him, instead giving him a dismissive, almost mocking look. This infuriates the boy. Later at school, he discovers the rich girl attends the same school, and her brother is in his class. Fate, it seems, has other plans for them. One day, while cleaning up, something hits the boy, Django, on the head. He cries out dramatically and turns to see the girl hiding behind a tree. A mischievous idea sparks in Django's mind. He pretends to be seriously hurt and collapses to the ground, hoping to scare her. Mi-poong, the girl, panics. Tears stream down her face as she frantically tries to wake him. Seeing her genuine distress, Django realizes he's gone too far and sits up, not wanting to upset her any further. Mi-poong tearfully apologizes, and Django immediately forgives her. This incident changes their dynamic completely. After school, Mi-poong starts secretly following Django, harboring a crush on him. Django, oblivious at first, gradually becomes aware of her affections. At this tender age, the seeds of young love are sown. One day, Mi-poong boldly declares that she'll marry him when they grow up. Django dismisses it as childish fancy, never imagining it could become a reality. One day after school, they visit a local music room. Legend has it that if two people who are truly in love enter, they'll hear a beautiful love song. While just a rumor, the music they hear that day becomes a cherished memory for both of them. Their happiness is short-lived. Mi-poong's family is suddenly forced to return to their hometown. During their tearful goodbye, Mi-poong begs Django not to forget her, promising to marry him when they're older. The two innocent children then part ways for over a decade. Years pass. Django becomes a successful lawyer, yet Mi-poong's memory remains. Meanwhile, Mi-poong's once privileged life takes a drastic turn. One night, her family is forced to flee their home. Tragically, during their escape, her father and brother are shot and killed. Before dying, Mi-poong's father gives her mother a ring, instructing her to find his father in Korea. To survive, Mi-poong, her mother, and her nephew continue their desperate flight. After a long and arduous journey, they finally reach Korea. However, the emotional toll proves too much for Mi-poong's mother, who is hospitalized. Remembering her father-in-law as a billionaire, a flicker of hope ignites within her, but despair quickly returns. She doesn't know his name or where he lives, possessing only the ring as a clue. Mi-poong retrieves their immigration papers, comforting her mother and resolving to live under their new identities. She works tirelessly, driven by the need to provide a better life for her family. After months of relentless effort, they finally save enough money to rent a better apartment. Their future remains uncertain, but Mi-poong's determination and resilience burn brightly, holding on to the hope of a better tomorrow. But the apartment she just rented turns out to be a scam. The property is under foreclosure. All the money she painstakingly saved over the past few months is gone, stolen by a fellow countryman. Mi-poong, once admired and the center of attention wherever she went, is now in dire straits. Determined to recoup her losses, Mi-poong goes to the police. They advise her to consult a lawyer before proceeding with legal action. Just then, her mother calls with devastating news. The moving company has dumped their belongings on the street. Panicked, Mi-poong rushes back, accidentally bumping into Django on the way. He pauses, momentarily stunned. Her frantic energy reminds him of his first love. Looking at their possessions scattered on the sidewalk, Mi-poong is at a loss. With nowhere else to go, she leads her mother and nephew to shelter under a bridge. Suddenly, a downpour begins, pushing Mi-poong's mother to the brink of despair, contemplating ending it all. Mi-poong pleads with her to hold on, and the three embrace, weeping inconsolably. Meanwhile, Mi-poong's grandfather, a billionaire, wakes from a haunting dream. He's been searching for his lost wife since they were separated during the war, never remarrying, always waiting. For decades, Mr. Kim has tirelessly pursued every lead, only to receive the devastating news of her death. His immense wealth, however, has made him the target of his greedy daughter-in-law, who eagerly awaits his demise to inherit his fortune. Unbeknownst to Mr. Kim, the family he yearns for is struggling to survive on the streets. Huddled under the bridge, Mi-poong and her family share instant noodles, but their meager refuge is short-lived. Following complaints from nearby residents, the police force them to move. Fortunately, they encounter the head of a local charity who, moved by their plight, offers them temporary housing. Looking at the elegant building before them, Mi-poong feels a wave of relief. Though their accommodation is just a simple storage room, it's a welcome respite, offering warmth and shelter. What Mi-poong and her mother don't know is that the entire building belongs to Mr. Kim, Mi-poong's grandfather. With the immediate housing crisis averted, Mi-poong focuses on finding a lawyer to pursue legal action and recover her lost deposit. Learning there's a law office on the third floor of the building, she goes for a consultation. Upon seeing the lawyer, Mi-pung freezes, a strange sense of familiarity washing over her. As her eyes fall on the nameplate on the desk, she's stunned. It's Jang Go, the boy she had a crush on years ago. After 14 years, their paths have crossed again. Now a successful lawyer, Jang Go starkly contrasts her current desperate situation. Ashamed of her circumstances, Mi-pung doesn't want him to see her like this, and quickly flees. Jang Go, intrigued, follows after her, wanting to understand the details of her case. Mi-pung, however, gives only vague answers before rushing off. Jang Go remains unaware that this is the girl he has cherished in his memory for so many years. After leaving, Mi-pung hides, watching him from a distance. Looking at his handsome face, her suspicion grows stronger. This is her childhood sweetheart. Fearful that he'll judge her current situation, she chooses to remain silent. Back in the storage room, Mi-pung tosses and turns, unable to sleep. The worry of her lost money and the shock of seeing her first love consume her thoughts. The next day, while taking her nephew to the park, she runs into the head of the charity who helped them. As they chat, Jang Go appears. Fate, it seems, is determined to bring them together. Mi-pung, startled, quickly turns away, fearing recognition. She makes an excuse and hurries off. After she leaves, Jang Go speaks with the charity director, learning about Mi-pung's predicament, scammed out of her savings. Now living in the building's storage room with her family. He's deeply moved by her misfortune. Kind-hearted Jang Go decides to visit Mi-pung. She's convinced he's recognized her, but Jang Go simply invites her back to his office. He explains he might be able to help her recover some of her lost deposit. Mi-pung is hesitant to interact with him further, but, clinging to the hope of retrieving her money, she agrees. Having changed her name, she believes he won't connect her to his childhood friend. Jang Go reviews her contract, explaining that under tenant protection laws, she might be entitled to a partial refund. Mi-pung is overjoyed, but still anxious about being recognized. She makes an excuse and quickly leaves after their discussion, her hasty exit catching Jang Go's attention. Walking away, Mi-pung tells herself that Jang Go isn't the childhood sweetheart she remembers, just a handsome, kind lawyer. The encounter motivates her to work even harder. Her spirits lift, sensing a positive shift in her situation. Later, seeing a young couple sharing street food triggers a nostalgic memory of sharing similar treats with Jang Go. Despite the years, she hasn't forgotten him. Grateful for Jang Go's help, Mi-pung buys some delicious food and secretly hangs it on his office door with a thank you note. Just as she turns to leave, she finds Jang Go standing behind her. Flustered and speechless, she's caught off guard. Seeing her reaction, Jang Go immediately takes down the bag of food and invites her inside. Mi-pung tries to refuse, claiming she's already eaten, but her rumbling stomach betrays her. She reluctantly agrees to join him for a late-night meal. After 14 years, they're sharing a meal together again. Learning she and his first love are from the same hometown, Jang Go asks if she knows Kim Mi-pung. Fearful of revealing her identity, Mi-pung gives a vague response and quickly excuses herself, hiding again in a corner, determined not to slip up. The next day, Mi-pung takes her nephew to preschool. At the bus stop, they encounter Jang Go again. He offers them a ride, but Mi-pung declines, insisting the bus is coming. Her nephew, however, excitedly climbs into Jang Go's car, leaving her no choice but to follow. On the drive, Mi-pung warns her nephew to finish his food, or he'll turn into a fish, a phrase she used to say to Jang Go. Jang Go is surprised by the familiar saying. Panicked, Mi-pung asks him to stop the car, wanting to escape the increasingly awkward situation. After she leaves, Jang Go replays their recent interactions in his mind. Pondering Mi-pung's strange reactions to the mention of her name, he decides to follow her to the preschool. Unable to contain himself any longer, he calls out, Kim Mi-pung. Mi-pung vehemently denies it, accusing him of being a creepy stalker, and hurries away. Later that day, as Jang Go drives home from work, he slams on the brakes. Stunned, he sees a woman picking up Mi-pung's nephew from preschool. It's the mother of his childhood sweetheart. He's now certain that the woman he's been helping is indeed Kim Mi-pung. That evening, as Mi-pung returns home after work, she hears a familiar melody drifting from the building. Drawn by the music, she finds herself walking towards the third floor. Mi-pung gently pushes open the office door to find a music box playing softly. As she picks it up, tears well up in her eyes. The music box holds precious memories of their childhood. Turning, she finds Jang Go watching her. She tries to flee, but he stops her. You're Mi-pung, aren't you? Knowing she can't hide any longer, Mi-pung confesses. Trying to maintain a semblance of pride, she jokes about how much she's grown, suggesting he simply didn't recognize her. Her forced smile breaks Jang Go's heart. He asks why she pretended not to know him. Just then, Mai Pung's mother calls, providing a convenient excuse to escape. Back home, Jang Go is restless. He can't reconcile the image of the princess in the luxury car with the woman struggling before him. He wonders what she's endured and where her family is. The next morning, he knocks on Mi Pung's door, hoping to meet her mother. Mi Pung pulls him aside, angrily accusing him of being the same clueless pumpkinhead he was as a child, oblivious to the pain she and her mother have suffered since becoming homeless in this city. She begs him to leave them alone. Jang Go anxiously asks about her father and brother. The news of their deaths shocks him. Mi Pung pleads with him not to reopen her wounds or mention the past to her mother. She explains they fled with nothing, not even a single family photo. Jang Go returns to his office. Heavy-hearted, he retrieves a childhood photo of himself and Mi Pung's brother and brings it to her that evening. Seeing her brother's face, Mi Pung breaks down in tears. Too embarrassed to go home, she hides in a public restroom until the swelling subsides. Then, her mother calls. Her nephew has a high fever. It's late, and finding a taxi is difficult. Luckily, they run into Jang Go, who rushes them to the hospital. Jang Go wants to stay with them, but Mai Pung insists he goes home, assuring him she can manage. He reluctantly leaves, pausing to watch her tenderly care for her mother and nephew. Early the next morning, he's back at the hospital to take them home. Mi Pung's mother remarks on the lawyer's kindness, his age reminding her of her son. Looking at their Spartan living conditions, Jang Go's heart aches. He offers them a vacant house he owns behind his own home. He tells his mother he's renting the house at a reduced rate to the family of a classmate's sister, promising to cover the rent until their compensation comes through. His mother readily agrees, praising his generosity. Mi Pung and her mother are overwhelmed with gratitude. Mi Pung's mother doesn't realize this kind of lawyer is not only her late son's classmate, but also the man her daughter has loved since childhood. Delighted with the bright, spacious house, Mi Pung and her mother feel like they're dreaming. Her nephew pinches them both, bringing them back to reality. Since Mi Pung moved in, Jang Go visits regularly after work. Their feelings for each other rekindle as they spend more time together. Unbeknownst to them, Jang Go's mother has already set her sights on another woman for her son, Hee-ra, the daughter of her close friend. And that friend is none other than Mr. Kim's daughter-in-law, the very woman who covets his fortune, and who is also Mai Pung's aunt. Mrs. Chung Ja and her family are living in Mr. Kim's, Mai Pung's grandfather, luxurious villa, but her greed knows no bounds. 15 million won a month isn't enough to cover her lavish spending, and she constantly schemes about inheriting her uncle's vast fortune. One day, debt collectors arrive at the villa, a scene witnessed by Jang Go's mother. Surprisingly, the usually frugal woman offers to lend Mrs. Chung Ja money, driven by her desire to see her son marry into wealth. Mrs. Chung Ja, sensing her friend's intentions, politely declines. A few days later, however, Mrs. Chung Ja is stressed. Overdue credit card bills are preventing her from indulging in her luxury shopping habits. An idea strikes her. She'll visit her dear friend, Jang Go's mother. Armed with a cheap watermelon as a token gift, she pays a visit. Seeing through the charade, Mrs. Chung Ja bluntly asks to borrow 30 million won. Jang Go's mother is shocked, but, prioritizing her son's future, agrees. She then proposes a blind date between their children. Much to Mrs. Chung Ja's dismay, she envisions a wealthier match for her daughter, but her current financial predicament forces her to accept. With the money secured, Mrs. Chung Ja tells her daughter, Hee-ra, to meet Jang Go and then find a way to reject him, hoping to put an end to his mother's matchmaking. However, Hee-ra is smitten with Jang Go at first sight, instantly captivated by his handsome appearance. Jang Go, however, remains indifferent, declining her invitation to a movie. Undeterred, Hee-ra seeks her mother's help to win him over. She even goes to his office, hoping to charm him, but Jang Go frankly states he's not interested in dating. This disappoints Jang Go's mother, while her friend suspects he might already have a girlfriend. Upon returning home, her suspicions are seemingly confirmed when she sees Jang Go with Mi Pung at his doorstep. She immediately calls her sister-in-law, claiming Jang Go has brought a girl home. Jang Go's mother rushes out, demanding to know who Mai Pung is. At that very moment, Mi Pung's mother arrives with a plate of cookies for their landlord. Seeing Jang Go's mother, she's so shocked that she drops the plate. She recognizes her as her late son's classmate's mother. While Jang Go and Mi Pung's brother were friends, the two mothers had a strained relationship. The thought of living near someone she dislikes infuriates Jang Go's mother. She confronts her son, demanding an explanation. He had told her a classmate's family was moving in, not Mi Pung's. Jang Go, surprised by her intense reaction, explains the tragic circumstances, the deaths of Mi-pung's father and brother, and how she was scammed out of all her money. He emphasizes Mi-pung's responsibility for her family and their desperate situation. He couldn't stand by and do nothing. His mother falls silent, but her resentment simmers, fueled by memories of Mi-pung's family's past arrogance. She storms over to the back house and confronts Mi-pung's mother, accusing her of exploiting her son's kindness to weasel her way into their property. Mi-pung's mother insists she was unaware of the arrangement, but Jang-go's mother remains unrelenting, demanding they find another place to live. To avoid living under a bridge again, Mi-pung's mother puts on a brave face, promising to move out as soon as they receive the compensation. Back in their room, she breaks down, her tears mirroring Mi-pung's own. Guilt gnaws at Mi-pung. She blames herself for being scammed. She pulls out a precious photo of her brother to comfort her mother. The sight of her son rekindles a flicker of hope within her. Determined to leave Jang-go's property quickly, Mi-pung's mother takes a dishwashing job at a small restaurant. The following day, while at work, Mi-pung sees Jang-go and Hee-ra laughing together in a restaurant. Disappointment washes over her. She realizes they belong to different worlds. She resolves to disappear from his life once she gets her money back. That evening, Mi-pung and her nephew return home to face Jang-go's mother's harsh glare. She warns Mi-pung to stay away from her son, boasting about the wealthy young woman pursuing him. Everything is progressing smoothly, and they plan to continue seeing each other. She's worried about what Hee-ra and her family would think if they saw him with Mi-pung. Before going inside, she pointedly reminds Mi-pung to use the back door. Her words sting Mi-pung's heart. The image of Jang-go laughing with Hee-ra resurfaces, intensifying her pain. She decides to bury her feelings. However, Jang-go continues to seek her out, taking her for black bean noodles, riding a cable car together, and taking pictures like a couple in love. As they spend more time together, Mi-pung finds herself reminiscing about their childhood, even performing their old dance. She nearly falls down the stairs, but Jang-go catches her. At that moment, she impulsively kisses him. As they pull apart, flustered, Jang-go teases her about stealing his first kiss. Embarrassed, Mi-pung insists it was an accident. Though secretly thrilled, Jang-go pretends to be heartbroken. Mi-pung, annoyed, tries to explain it was unintentional. Jang-go playfully retorts that she can't give him his first kiss back, accusing her of being experienced in such matters. Exasperated, Mi-pung declares she'll turn into a duck if she speaks to him again. She storms off, and Jang-go chases after her, apologizing when he sees she's on the verge of tears. They walk and bicker for hours. During their conversation, Jang-go makes a heartfelt confession, telling her he can't imagine his life without her, and promising to always be there for her. Shortly after, Mi-pung's scooter breaks down. She immediately thinks of Jang-go, and within minutes, he's fixed it. Mi-pung praises his handyman skills. Noticing his shirt is now dirty, she feels guilty and offers to make him a new one. She takes his measurements, and as they stand close, the air thickens with unspoken feelings. Flustered, Mi-pung rushes away. Back home, she stays up late sewing the shirt. The next morning, she delivers the finished garment to a surprised and touched Jang-go. Learning that Mi-pung spent the entire night making the shirt, Jang-go immediately removes his tie and tries it on, causing Mi-pung to blush and her heart to flutter. Jang-go, ever the tease, attributes his dashing appearance to his physique, not her sewing skills. Grateful for the gift, he invites her to dinner. What promises to be a happy day takes a turn when Mi-pung receives a call from the police. Her mother, spotting Shin-ae, the woman who stole their money, on the street, gave chase. However, she mistakenly confronted the wrong person, leading to a physical altercation and her arrest for assault. Mi-pung doesn't believe her mother would resort to violence, suspecting a case of mistaken identity fueled by trauma. Fortunately, Jang-go intervenes, helping to smooth things over and secure her release. Upset, Mi-pung goes for a solitary drink. Jang-go calls, concerned, and joins her. He asks about Shin-ae. Mi-pung explains that Shin-ae was an orphan child, taken in by her mother. During their escape, Shin-ae stole their money and vanished. To Mi-pung's family, Shin-ae is a heartless betrayer. Meanwhile, Mrs. Chung-ja, burdened by the debt she owes Jang-go's mother, drowns her sorrows in alcohol. Returning home drunk, she lashes out at her husband and Mr. Kim, accusing him of treating them like beggars and demanding a share of his wealth. Her husband, mortified, berates her for her outburst, reminding her they'd be destitute without Mr. Kim's support. Sobered up, Mr. Kim asks how much she owes. Regretting her drunken behavior, Mrs. Chung-ja inflates the figure to 50 million won. Honoring a promise to his deceased brother to care for his family, Mr. Kim agrees to pay. Later, he calls his nephew in for a private conversation. Reflecting on his daughter-in-law's words, he proposes to formally adopt him as his son. Mrs. Chungja, overhearing this, is stunned. Her son, initially hesitant, expresses his deep respect and gratitude for his uncle. Mrs. Chungja, however, is ecstatic at this turn of events. The next day, she triumphantly repays Jang Go's mother, condescendingly advising her to recognize her family's lower social standing. She questions Jang Go's suitability for her daughter, Hira. Jang Go's mother, no longer willing to tolerate her arrogance, reminds her that Mr. Kim's fortune isn't guaranteed to be theirs. He could have other heirs, or choose to donate his wealth. Mrs. Chungja, however, remains smug, confident that her husband's adoption solidifies their claim. Defeated, Jang Go's mother returns home, only to find Mi Pung's nephew has broken her prized kimchi pot. She explodes, threatening to evict them. Mi Pung's mother rushes to apologize and clean up the mess, but Jang Go's mother is relentless. That evening, Mi Pung comforts her nephew, who promises to stay out of the garden. After careful consideration, Mi Pung's stepfather decides to accept Mr. Kim's offer of adoption. Before Mr. Kim can finalize the adoption, a visitor from his hometown arrives with shocking news. His wife was pregnant before they were separated. Mr. Kim is overjoyed to learn he might have a child out there. He implores his nephew, now his adopted son, to help find his lost offspring. Meanwhile, Mi Pung's mother, wanting to ease her daughter's burden, asks the charity director for a job. He mentions an opening at a cold noodle restaurant, which happens to be owned by Mr. Kim. She accepts, unaware that her new employer is the father-in-law she's been searching for. Overhearing a coworker express sympathy for Mr. Kim, she's puzzled. Why pity a man for his wealth and status? She then learns about his tragic past, his wife's death during the war, and his lack of immediate family. The director is only a distant relative. Oblivious to Mr. Kim's search for his child, Mrs. Chungja remains fixated on her husband inheriting his fortune. The director, aware of her greed, keeps the search a secret. Her continued pressure on her husband to secure the adoption angers him, and he sends her home. The kind director, seeing Mi Pung's mother's struggles, gives her a bag of pastries. Mi Pung worries about her mother's demanding new job, but her mother reassures her, describing the friendly atmosphere and emphasizing the need to save money to move out. Relieved, Mi Pung continues her delivery route. She spots a flyer for a design contest, offering a 10 million won prize and a job at the company. Recognizing this as a golden opportunity, she begins working on her submission. Learning about the contest, Jang Go offers Mi Pung the use of his office computer for research. Exhausted from working all day, Mi Pung falls asleep at his desk. Jang Go's aunt returns to the office and wakes her. Suspecting Mi Pung has feelings for her nephew, she warns her to give up, lest Jang Go's mother find out, which would lead to their eviction. Mi Pung, startled and unsure how to respond, quickly leaves. Unaware of this encounter, Jang Go returns to the office after a client meeting, only to find Mi Pung gone. He calls, annoyed that she left before their dinner date. Mi Pung coldly apologizes and hangs up, avoiding his questions. He calls again, but she ignores it. Frustrated, he throws pebbles at her window. When she opens it, he asks if she's mad at him. Mi Pung remains silent, closing the window. The next day, while preparing her submission, Mi Pung realizes she's missing a crucial sketch. She left it at Jang Go's office. He rushes to deliver it, then wheedles her into joining him for street food. He complains about her sudden behavior change, admitting he lost sleep worrying about what he did wrong. Their conversation is interrupted by the arrival of one of Jang Go's classmates. Jang Go's classmate, seeing Mi Pung with him, asks if she's his girlfriend. Jang Go casually introduces her as his younger sister, deflating Mi Pung's spirits. She remains silent during the drive back. Oblivious, Jang Go tells jokes and teases her like a child, further irritating her. He fails to understand her feelings, and they part ways again in awkward silence. Mi Pung is conflicted. She knows a relationship is unlikely, yet she can't help but hope. Convinced that Jang Go sees her only as a pitiful younger sister, she resolves to extinguish her feelings before he discovers them. Meanwhile, Mi Pung's design wins the contest, securing her the prize money and the job. As for Shin'e, the woman Mi Pung's mother saw is indeed the same person who stole their money. She now works at a high-end clothing store, transforming into a glamorous socialite at night, frequenting upscale bars to target wealthy men. Tonight, she sets her sights on the son of a chaebol family, feigning a spilled drink to initiate contact. Her plan is thwarted by his girlfriend's arrival, forcing a frustrated Shin'e to leave. At a convenience store, she catches the eye of a young man, who is instantly captivated by her beauty. Shin'e, however, scoffs at his casual appearance, unaware that he's also from a wealthy family. Back home, staring at a pile of bills, Shin-ae vows to snag a rich husband. Coincidentally, the man she snubbed is Hee-ra's brother, Hee-dong. He returns home, inspired, and begins sketching Shin-ae. Determined to see her again, he goes to the convenience store the next morning and finds her there. This time, he confidently introduces himself as a comic book artist, hoping she'll be his new muse. Focused on her pursuit of a billionaire husband, Shin-ae dismissively accepts his business card, tossing it in the trash later, muttering about poor boys trying to catch swans. However, her arrogance is quickly shattered when she overhears gossip at a bar. Hee-dong, despite his casual attire and penchant for instant noodles at the convenience store, is from a wealthy family. Shin-ae races home, retrieves his card, and calls him, feigning interest while secretly plotting to exploit his wealth. She adopts a sweet, innocent persona to win him over. While preparing for their date, she runs into her former foster mother. Mi-poong's mother grabs her hair, furiously denouncing her betrayal. Shin-ae breaks free and hides in the store's restroom. With directions from a bystander, Mi-poong's mother finds her and locks her in, calling Mi-poong for help. Trapped, Shin-ae tries to defend herself, claiming she spent the stolen money, and it wasn't enough to start a new life. Enraged, Mi-poong's mother opens the door and confronts her. A struggle ensues, and they fall. Desperate to escape, Shin-ae removes her high heel and strikes her former foster mother's hands, then flees. Just as Shin-ae is about to escape, Mi-poong arrives. Shin-ae pushes Mi-poong's mother to the ground and runs. Her mother urges Mi-poong to catch Shin-ae, but she gets away. Mi-poong rushes her mother to the hospital, vowing to bring Shin-ae to justice. After ensuring Mi-poong and her mother have left, Shin-ae hurries to her date with Hee-dong, fabricating a story about rescuing an injured cat and taking it to the vet to explain her lateness. They enjoy a pleasant evening strolling and chatting. The next day, Mi-poong and her mother go shopping for work clothes at the very store where Shin-ae works. Spotting them, Shin-ae hides in the fitting room. Peeking out, she's startled when Mi-poong's nephew sees her and bows politely. After they leave, Shin-ae feigns tears, telling her manager that her grandmother collapsed and she needs to transfer to a branch closer to her to provide care. Meanwhile, Jang-go checks the company website and discovers that Mi-poong won the design contest. He rushes to find her, demanding to know why she didn't tell him. Mi-poong apologizes, and a mollified Jang-go takes her to a celebratory dinner. Unfortunately, they run into Jang-go's classmate again. Upon learning about Mi-poong's win, he pulls up a chair, ostensibly to congratulate her. When Jang-go steps away to take a call, the classmate makes inappropriate advances, even asking Mi-poong to be his girlfriend. Jang-go returns, witnesses this behavior, and pulls him aside. The classmate dismisses Mi-poong as a poor girl, implying she's just for fun. Enraged, Jang-go punches him, refusing to let anyone disrespect her. He comforts Mi-poong, assuring her the man won't bother her again. Though she says nothing, his words sting, fueling her determination to succeed and reclaim her dignity. The next morning, a nervous Mi-poong starts her new job. Hee-dong, after his date with Shin-ae, works on his comic. Shin-ae, worried he hasn't called, is relieved when he invites her to dinner. Feigning reluctance, she accepts, then steers him away from the expensive restaurant he booked to a street food stall. She remarks how much food they can get for the price of a single bottle of water at a fancy hotel, charming Hee-dong with her apparent innocence. He's convinced she's the one. Unaware of her manipulative tactics, he enjoys the meal, while Shin-ae, seeing his delight, knows her plan is working. To accelerate their relationship, Shin-ae stages a romantic atmosphere at her apartment, dimming the lights and spraying perfume. Hee-dong arrives with flowers, instantly captivated. Shin-ae offers Hee-dong a chair to climb and fix a light bulb. He barely touches it, and it flickers on. Shin-ae showers him with exaggerated praise, causing a flustered Hee-dong to lose his balance and nearly fall. Expecting him to make a move, she's surprised by his shy, blushing retreat. To ease the awkwardness, she prepares a plate of fruit. Seeing her gentle demeanor, Hee-dong is more smitten than ever. After dinner, they stroll through a park. Shin-ae reveals it's her birthday, and, with expertly crafted crocodile tears, laments being alone, adding how happy she's been with him lately. Her performance tugs at Hee-dong's heartstrings, and he kisses her. They're officially a couple. His sister, Hee-ra, heartbroken after being rejected by Jang-go, got drunk and had a one-night stand with Jang-soo, Jang-go's younger brother. Their impulsive romance is met with fierce opposition from Mrs. Chung-ja. Hee-ra and Jang-soo defy their families and register their marriage. Hee-dong confronts the newlyweds, but seeing Jiang Su's genuine affection for his sister, he relents, advising He-ra to apologize to their parents. Meanwhile, Mi-pung leaves work early to visit her mother and sees Jang-go laughing with another woman. Feeling a pang of insecurity, she watches them walk away, convinced Jang-go is out of her league. Later that night, Jang-go sees Mi-pung shopping and greets her. Sensing her curiosity about the woman she saw earlier, he explains she's his colleague, another lawyer. He'll be opposing in court the next day. Mid-explanation, his nose starts bleeding. Mi-pung removes her headband to help him. Relieved by his explanation, her mood brightens. That night, she embroiders a 4-leaf clover on a handkerchief for Jang-go, hoping it brings him luck in court. The next day, Jang-go's skillful arguments and compelling evidence win him the case against the nation's top law firm, catapulting him to online fame. After work, he picks up Mi-pung for a celebratory dinner. He thanked her for the handkerchief, admitting it calmed his nerves. Seeing she's overeaten, he takes her to an arcade. The following day, Mi-pung helps an elderly man who falls. It's Mr. Kim, her grandfather, though neither recognizes the other. Touched by her kindness and buying him water, he urges her to get back to work. Watching her leave, he feels an inexplicable connection. That day, Jang-go is invited to meet with representatives from the prestigious law firm he defeated in court. They offer him a job, but he says he'll consider it. Leaving the building, he realizes it's where Mi-pung works. So, he calls Mi-pung and brings drinks to her office, introducing himself as her older brother and asking her colleagues to look after her. They immediately assume he's her boyfriend, and Mi-pung's explanations fall on deaf ears, especially when Jang-go is waiting for her outside after work. Mi-pung tells Jang-go about the misunderstanding, and he innocently offers to clarify their sibling relationship with her coworkers the next day. Mi-pung sarcastically asks if he'll take responsibility if the rumors ruin her marriage prospects. Jang-go agrees he'll take responsibility by finding her a husband. Mi-pung stares at him in disbelief, wondering why she ever fell for such a clueless man. Meanwhile, Mrs. Chung-ja, still refusing to accept Jang-go as a son-in-law, meets with Jang-go's mother, demanding she force the newlyweds to divorce and kick He-ra out. Jang-go's mother refuses, declaring she'll treat He-ra like her own daughter. That evening, the family prepares a cozy wedding room for the young couple, complete with matching pajamas from Jang-go's aunt. They celebrate with a small party. After a month of hard work, Mi-pung receives her first paycheck. Excited, she shares the good news with her mother, envisioning a brighter future. They agreed to give the money, along with their savings, to Jang-go to partially cover their back rent. However, Jang-go's mother misinterprets the gesture as a paltry attempt to appease her. Without waiting for her son's explanation, she confronts Mi-pung and her mother, accusing them of trying to manipulate Jang-go and demanding they pay all back rent and move out immediately, crushing Mi-pung's spirits. Heartbroken and humiliated, Mi-pung walks to a park, seeking solace. Missing her father, she faces north and speaks to him in a tearful whisper. Mr. Kim happens to be passing by and witnesses her distress. Drawn by an unseen force, he approaches and comforts her, assuring her that kindness will be rewarded. They go to a cafe, where Mi-pung shares her struggles, and Mr. Kim speaks of his own, his ongoing search for his lost family. They exchange names and numbers. Mr. Kim notes the similarity between their names, finding it a pleasant coincidence. Mi-pung jokes that perhaps they were family in a past life, unaware she's speaking to her grandfather. Returning home, Mi-pung finds Jang-go asleep on a park bench, waiting for her. He apologizes for his mother's behavior. Mi-pung asks him to keep the incident from their mothers. The next day, she runs into Jang-go returning from a basketball game. They walk and joke, their easy camaraderie returning. Just then, Nam-yi, Jang-go's colleague and the woman Mi-pung saw him with earlier, approaches. Jang-go's mom, knowing Nam-yi came from a wealthy family and had taken a shine to her son, invited her in and laid on the charm thick. Their laughter echoed through the house, leaving Mi-pung feeling a pang of unease. Before Nam-yi left, she offered Jang-go a job at her family's law firm, promising to double his current salary. After mulling it over for a few days, Jang-go accepted the lucrative offer. Just then, he received a frantic call from one of Mi-pung's colleagues. They told him Mi-pung had gone missing during a company outing at a paintball range. Worried sick, Jang-go raced to the scene and joined the search party. It turned out Mi-pung had slipped and tumbled down a hillside, knocking herself unconscious. Jang-go quickly located her phone and found her. Her ankle was twisted from the fall, so Jang-go carried her down the mountain and carefully helped her inside. Mi Pung's mother was heartbroken to see her daughter injured, but noticing Mi Pung's demeanor around Jang Go, she began to suspect her daughter's feelings. Mi Pung confessed she'd had a crush on Jang Go since she was 14, but she knew he only saw her as a younger sister, someone to help and care for. The harder she tried not to like him, the more her feelings grew. Her mother, pained by her daughter's unrequited love, urged her to let go of her feelings for Jang Go. She decided they needed to move away to prevent Mi Pung from seeing Jang Go so often and further fueling her affections. The next morning, Jang Go kindly drove Mi Pung to work. Nam Yi happened to witness Mi Pung getting out of Jang Go's car. She immediately complained to Jang Go's mother, who, enraged, confronted Mi Pung's mother. She accused Mi Pung of clinging to Jang Go and trying to ruin his bright future. She demanded that Mi Pung and her mother move out as soon as possible. Nam Yi also confronted Mi Pung directly, asking her to help her win Jang Go's heart. Mi Pung, while heartbroken, told Nam Yi she couldn't help her, but wouldn't interfere with her pursuit of Jang Go. Later that day, back at the office, Mi Pung received a bouquet of roses. Her colleagues immediately assumed they were from Jang Go and encouraged her to call him. With a flutter of hope in her chest, Mi Pung called Jang Go and asked him out. Gathering her courage, she asked him if he liked her. "Yes, I like you," he replied. "That's why I drive you to work every day, even though you're always grumpy with me." Mi Pung realized he liked her as a sister. Confused and hurt, she asked him why he sent the flowers. Jang Go denied sending them, even scolding her for accepting flowers from a stranger. What if it was some creep? Nam Yi threw a lavish welcome party for Jang Go at the firm. He was clearly the star of the show. Everyone knew he was likely to become the son-in-law of the firm's president, so they all flocked to congratulate him. By the end of the night, Jang Go was completely drunk, and Nam Yi offered to take him home. As they arrived, they ran into Mi Pung returning from the store. To stake her claim, Nam Yi boldly kissed Jang Go right in front of Mi Pung. Devastated, Mi Pung fled to a nearby park, tears streaming down her face. The image of the kiss replayed in her mind, a painful reminder that she didn't stand a chance with Jang Go. Because Nam Yi was beautiful and came from a wealthy family, Jang Go's family was ecstatic, practically giddy, when they saw the lipstick mark on his face. After He Ra left, Jang Go's grandmother even started brainstorming baby names. When Jang Go woke up, his family teased him relentlessly about his whirlwind romance. Jang Go, realizing what had happened, was completely mortified. He was especially worried that Mi Pung might have seen the kiss, so he texted her, inviting her to lunch. Mi Pung declined. Sensing the gravity of the situation, Jang Go prepared to go find Mi Pung and explain everything. However, he ran into his friend, Sung Sil, who was on his way to deliver flowers to Mi Pung. To prevent Sung Sil from getting close to Mi Pung, Jang Go warned him to stay away. Sung Sil explained that the flowers were an apology for his previous disrespectful behavior towards Mi Pung, and that he wanted to apologize in person. Blinded by jealousy, Jang Go refused to listen. He berated Sung Sil for his past actions, and insisted he leave Mi Pung alone. Seeing Jang Go's anger, Sung Sil retorted, "You're not Mi Pung's boyfriend. You're not even her brother. So what right do you have to interfere?" This left Jang Go speechless, as he'd never actually confessed his feelings to Mi Pung. Sung Sil, smoothing back his hair in his car and looking at Jang Go through the rearview mirror, vowed to win Mi Pung over. A frustrated Jang Go called Mi Pung again, but she still refused to answer. He resorted to throwing a pebble at her window. Annoyed but resigned, Mi Pung agreed to meet him. She expected him to explain the kiss and finally confess his feelings. Instead, Jang Go only warned her not to be fooled by Sung Sil and to stay away from him. This infuriated Mi Pung, who snapped that her affairs were none of his business. The next day, Mi Pung was unexpectedly summoned to meet the new marketing director. To her surprise, it was Sung Sil. Noticing her shock, Sung Sil apologized again for his past behavior and assured her that no one at the company would bother her again. Mi Pung curtly replied that she had moved on and hoped he wouldn't harass her. As Mi Pung left, Sung Sil found himself increasingly intrigued by her and later used the pretense of choosing new employee uniforms to invite her shopping. When Mi Pung emerged from the dressing room in a new dress, Sung Sil was so captivated he dropped his magazine. This scene was witnessed by Jang Go, Nam Yi, and his mother, who were also shopping. Jang Go, furious, demanded to know what Mi Pung was doing there, then stormed off. On the drive home, Jang Go's mother continued to harp on the situation, even calling Mi Pung a gold digger, which enraged Jang Go and led him to yell at his mother. That night, He angrily waited for Mi-pung to return home and confronted her, asking why she accepted Sung-sil's gifts. Did she want to date him? Mi-pung retorted, asking why he cared so much. Who she dated and what gifts she received were none of his business. Heartbroken, Jong-go decided he wouldn't interfere in her life anymore. Before leaving, he apologized for bothering her all this time. As he walked away, Mi-pung fought back tears, remembering all the happy times they'd shared. Since Hee-dong hadn't made any moves, Shin-ae decided to stage a grand performance. She hired a thug to snatch Mrs. Chung-ja's purse. When the moment was right, Shin-ae sprang into action, chasing the thief away and earning Mrs. Chung-ja's immense gratitude. Mrs. Chung-ja insisted Shin-ae come to her house as a guest, but Shin-ae politely declined, saying it was nothing, and hurried off, her real goal achieved, leaving a positive first impression on Hee-dong's mother. The next morning, Mi-pung strategically positioned herself near the mansion, called Hee-dong to confirm he was home, and then, accidentally, ran into his grandmother. Grandmother recognized her immediately and invited her inside. This time, Shin-ae didn't refuse. As soon as she entered the house, Mrs. Chung-ja also recognized her, feeling a strange sense of connection with this beautiful young woman. Before they could chat, Hee-dong came downstairs and, recognizing Mi-pung, rushed towards her, leaving his mother and grandmother bewildered. Mrs. Chung-ja asked how they knew each other. Before Hee-dong could answer, Shin-ae chimed in, pretending surprised. I didn't realize this was my boyfriend's house. This stunned everyone, and Hee-dong, playing along, confirmed their relationship. Mrs. Chung-ja was in disbelief. What a coincidence! Were they destined to be together? Shin-ae quickly gained acceptance into Hee-dong's family, bringing her one step closer to her dream of marrying into wealth. Seeing them together, Mrs. Chung-ja couldn't contain her joy. But Shin-ae wasn't done with her performance. During a walk with Hee-dong, she launched into another act, tearfully lamenting her status as a poor orphan, unworthy of his wealthy family. Not wanting Shin-ae to feel insecure, Hee-dong firmly declared his intention to marry her. Satisfied with his response, Shin-ae dropped the act. Eager to see her son married, Mrs. Chung-ja personally invited Shin-ae to dinner. Believing she had Mrs. Chung-ja's blessing, Shin-ae meticulously prepared for the meeting. However, as soon as she arrived at the restaurant, Mrs. Chung-ja began inquiring about her family. Upon learning that Shin-ae's parents were deceased and she had grown up in an orphanage, Mrs. Chung-ja's demeanor changed. Disappointed, she bluntly stated her desire for a daughter-in-law from a suitable background and demanded Shin-ae break up with her son before abruptly leaving. Humiliated and enraged, Shin-ae vowed to become Hee-dong's wife no matter what. Back home, Mrs. Chung-ja tearfully pleaded with Hee-dong to break up with the poor girl. Hee-dong, believing their love was genuine, was furious that his mother had insulted Shin-ae and stormed out. He rushed to Shin-ae's, embracing her and promising to protect her from further heartache. Mrs. Chung-ja panicked that her son might do something rash, bombarded Shin-ae with messages, begging for updates on his whereabouts. Shin-ae, seeing the messages, smiled victoriously. The next day, Mrs. Chung-ja tracked Shin-ae down. Seeing Hee-dong's mother at her door, Shin-ae calmly called her boyfriend, feigning fear and claiming there were two scary men outside. She then left the phone on the table and let Mrs. Chung-ja and Hee-dong's grandmother into her apartment. Shin-ae allowed Mrs. Chung-ja to berate her, crying out for help. When Hee-dong learned his mother was harassing his girlfriend, he immediately turned his car around. Feeling her performance wasn't dramatic enough, Shin-ae scratched her own face. When Hee-dong arrived, she weakly claimed she didn't want him to see her like this. Hee-dong was enraged, unable to forgive his mother's cruel behavior. Shin-ae collapsed into his arms. Paradoxically, Mrs. Chung-ja's outrageous actions strengthened Hee-dong's resolve to marry Shin-ae. He took her home and formally introduced her to his extended family. Mrs. Chung-ja was livid, refusing to accept this scheming woman. However, Hee-dong was resolute, declaring he would choose Shin-ae no matter the consequences. He then ripped the tape off Shin-ae's face and angrily confronted his mother. Mr. Kim was shocked, and both Mrs. Chung-ja and Hee-ra were horrified, scrambling to justify their actions. However, their explanations only made things worse. Shin-ae, seizing the opportunity, launched into a dramatic display of crocodile tears. Accepting all the blame, Hee-dong declared that if his family couldn't accept their relationship, he would leave this heartless house and never return. He then pulled Shin-ae out with him. Mr. Kim, furious, scolded Hee-ra, while her husband warned her that if she didn't want to lose her son, she'd better accept his relationship. Defeated, Mrs. Chung-ja agreed to let them have their wedding. On the wedding day, Mrs. Chung-ja greeted guests with tears in her eyes. Shin-ae, having gotten her way, sat beaming in the bridal suite. oblivious to the fact that Mi Pung's mother had also been invited by Mr. Kim. As the bride and groom walked down the aisle, Shin-ae spotted the foster mother she had swindled. Mi Pung's mother recognized Shin-ae too, and though she wanted to expose her, she suppressed her anger. However, Shin-ae, overcome with panic, fainted before the ceremony could even begin. Staff quickly called for help, and Hee-dong rushed his bride to the hospital. The guests were left in confusion. At the hospital, Mrs. Chung-ja complained about Shin-ae fainting, especially since she wasn't even pregnant yet. Shin-ae tearfully apologized. Mrs. Chung-ja was about to continue her tirade when Mr. Kim pulled her out of the room. As soon as they left, Mi Pung and her mother arrived, much to Shin-ae's horror. Years ago, Mi Pung's mother had taken Shin-ae, a homeless girl, off the streets, but Shin-ae had betrayed their kindness. When Mi Pung's family fell on hard times, Shin-ae stole their remaining savings, leaving them nearly destitute. Mi Pung slapped Shin-ae hard, causing her to collapse to her knees, begging for forgiveness. Shin-ae cursed herself for her past actions, pleading with Mi Pung and her mother to forgive her. She claimed she had only been trying to survive and hadn't realized how close she'd brought them to ruin. Now, with the husband unaware of her past, she wanted a fresh start and begged them to forgive her and pretend they'd never met. But Mi Pung was unforgiving. She demanded Shin-ae write an IOU, promising to repay the stolen money. Seeing Shin-ae's desperation, Mi Pung's mother softened slightly and pulled her daughter away. Shin-ae sobbed, vowing to let nothing destroy her dream of entering high society, threatening to destroy anyone who got in her way. To appease her in-laws, Shin-ae woke up early the next morning and prepared a delicious breakfast. Everyone was charmed by her seemingly innocent demeanor, except Mrs. Chung-ja, who saw through her manipulative facade. After breakfast, Hee-dong showered Shin-ae with affection, declaring that marrying her was the best decision of his life. He wanted to spend some quality time with his new wife, but his mother interrupted, asking Hee-dong to leave so she could speak with Shin-ae privately. Hee-dong, understanding, immediately left the room. Mrs. Chung-ja, with a serious expression, warned Shin-ae not to do anything to upset Mr. Kim, as his temper was volatile and he could throw her out on a whim. Shin-ae nodded, understanding that Mr. Kim held the real power in the family. Wanting to secure Mr. Kim as her protector, she decided to demonstrate her diligence by helping out at the restaurant he managed. However, she ran into Mi Pung's mother again, the woman she constantly feared, terrified that her secret would be revealed. Shin-ae quickly gathered all her savings and offered them to Mi Pung's mother, begging her to keep quiet and pretend they didn't know each other. Mi Pung's mother, heartbroken, took the money without a word and left. Perhaps, in her heart, she had finally forgiven the manipulative young woman. Once alone, Shin-ae's face hardened, muttering that if Mi Pung's mother dared to reveal her secret, she'd pay with her life. Meanwhile, Jang Go overheard some colleagues gossiping about Mi Pung and implying she had a questionable relationship with the marketing director. He angrily warned them to stop spreading rumors. Consumed by jealousy, he stormed into Sung Sil's office, dragged Mi Pung out, and urged her to quit. But Mi Pung needed the job to support her family and told Jang Go to mind his own business. That evening, Sung Sil, using his position, took Mi Pung to a bar, claiming they were meeting a client. It was actually a gathering of his friends, including Jang Go. When Sung Sil went to the restroom, one of his friends asked if he had feelings for Mi Pung. Sung Sil boasted that he would make her his that night. Overhearing this, Jang Go flew into a rage and punched Sung Sil, starting a brawl. Seeing the situation escalating, Mi Pung dumped a bucket of ice on Jang Go, telling him to calm down. She then dragged Sung Sil out of the bar. Heartbroken and drunk, Jang Go stumbled home, calling Mi Pung repeatedly. When she didn't answer, he started yelling her name outside her house, demanding she come out and talk to him. The commotion brought everyone in the house, including Mi Pung's mother, outside to restrain him. Jang Go's incessant calls for Mi Pung alarmed his mother, who then met privately with Mi Pung. She expressed her desire for Jang Go to date Nam Yi and marry into a wealthy family, hinting that Mi Pung was the obstacle. She offered Mi Pung money to leave their house. Mi Pung refused the money, but promised to move out soon. Ashamed of his behavior, Jang Go texted Mi Pung, asking to meet. He apologized for the previous night and urged her to quit her job, promising to find her a better one. Mi Pung refused, stating she got the job on her merit and he had no right to tell her what to do. At that moment, Jang Go finally confessed, "Because I like you. I really like you." Mi Pung was stunned, but quickly regained her composure, suggesting he was confusing his feelings. After all, he had previously said he only saw her as a sister. Furthermore, even if he liked her, She didn't reciprocate those feelings and had only ever seen him as a friend. She believed he was better suited to Nam Yi. She then quickly excused herself, trying to hide her tears. Jang Go, heartbroken, turned to alcohol again. He replayed their shared memories, realizing how foolish he'd been. He returned home and once again stood outside Mai Pung's window, yelling her name, demanding she talk to him. The commotion once again brought everyone out to pull him back inside. Mi Pung's mother took this opportunity to set Jang Go's mother straight. It wasn't her daughter chasing Jang Go, but the other way around. She also urged Jang Go's mother to respect Mai Pung's budding relationship with Sung Sil, the chaebol heir. The next day, Sung Sil took Mai Pung to a dinner party. Jang Go witnessed this, his heart aching as he saw her with another man. Nam Yi, seeing this, became jealous. She confronted Mai Pung, warning her to stay away from her man. But Mai Pung wasn't easily intimidated. She retorted that she wasn't interfering, implying that Nam Yi simply wasn't captivating enough to hold Jang Go's interest. Enraged, Nam Yi pushed Mi Pung into the swimming pool. Both men immediately jumped in to save her, but Sung Sil reached Mai Pung first. Jang Go, left with no choice, rescued Nam Yi. As they were pulled out of the pool, a shaken Mi Pung landed in Sung Sil's arms, and he took the opportunity to hold her close. This didn't sit well with Jang Go. After the party, Sung Sil thoughtfully drove Mi Pung home, reminding her to take a hot bath. Mi Pung's mother, learning of the incident, expressed her gratitude. Sung Sil politely excused himself and left. Meanwhile, Jang Go sat outside in the courtyard, replaying the scene in his mind and weeping. The next day, grateful to Sung Sil for saving her daughter, Mi Pung's mother invited him over for dinner. As Sung Sil was leaving, he confessed his feelings for Mai Pung. Jang Go, returning from work, witnessed this scene. Seeing them about to kiss, he turned away in despair, finding a secluded spot to unleash his frustration. Unbeknownst to him, nothing actually happened between Mai Pung and Sung Sil. Mi Pung's heart belonged to Jang Go, and her coldness towards him was due to her promise to his mother. Jang Go's mother continued to warn Mi Pung against pursuing her son. Sung Sil, however, was intrigued by Mai Pung's independent spirit. The following day, Jang Go confronted Sung Sil by the river, asking if he was serious about Mai Pung. Sung Sil, placing a hand over his heart, assured him he had never been more sincere. Hearing this, Jang Go finally decided to let go. If he couldn't be with the woman he loved, he would follow his mother's advice and try dating Nam Yi. Soon after, their families met at an upscale restaurant to discuss the engagement. Suddenly, romantic music filled the air, and everyone turned to see Sung Sil kneeling before Mi Pung, proposing. He didn't give her a chance to respond, slipping the ring onto her finger. Jang Go's heart was in turmoil. Driving Nam Yi home, he was oblivious to her attempts at conversation. When she leaned in for a goodnight kiss, he instinctively flinched, hurting her feelings. She pointed out that he had rejected her kiss before. It dawned on Jang Go that he had never kissed Nam Yi. It had all been a fabrication on her part. Nam Yi was heartbroken by his rejection. With their engagement looming, she wondered how long he would continue to push her away. Jang Go, realizing he had been unfair, asked for some time. The next day, Jang Go and Mai Pung found themselves trapped together in a stalled elevator. To comfort her, Jang Go reminisced about their childhood, confessing that he had liked her since then, though he hadn't realized it at the time. He apologized for taking so long to understand his feelings. Mi Pung's eyes welled up. She hadn't realized their feelings were mutual. Unable to contain her emotions any longer, she boldly leaned in and gave him his first kiss. Just then, the elevator doors opened, revealing their kiss to everyone in the lobby. Sung Sil, seeing his supposed fiancé kissing Jang Go, flew into a rage, grabbing Jang Go by the collar and pulling him away. Jang Go pushed him off. Sung Sil, furious, challenged Jang Go to a fight, but Mi Pung's words stopped him. She declared that Jang Go had done nothing wrong. Sung Sil, chasing after her, demanded an explanation. Mi Pung calmly stated that she had initiated the kiss, and then returned his ring. Meanwhile, Nam Yi, having witnessed everything, ran to Jang Go's mother and tattled on Mi Pung. Hearing that Mai Pung was trying to steal her son again, Jang Go's mother marched over and slapped Mi Pung, accusing her of interfering in Jang Go and Nam Yi's engagement. But Mai Pung stood her ground. She bravely confessed her feelings, admitting she had tried to suppress her love for Jang Go, but couldn't. Jang Go's mother coldly told her to give up, insisting her son was only suited for someone wealthy. Jang Go arrived just in time to witness this exchange. Realizing his mother had been manipulating Mi Pung to stay away from him, he told his mother to stop interfering in his life and pulled Mai Pung away. Jang Go's mother, enraged that her son defied her for this girl, stormed into Mai Pung's room, smashing her belongings and declaring to Mai Pung's mother that her daughter was ruining Django's future. She then evicted them, demanding they leave immediately. Luckily, Django arrived and dragged his increasingly hysterical mother away. After this traumatic event, Mai Pung and her mother had a heart-to-heart. Her mother discouraged her from pursuing Django, believing she wouldn't be happy even if they did get married. Meanwhile, Django confronted his mother, warning her not to interfere in his love life and declaring his love for Mai Pung. His mother remained adamant, seeing Mai Pung as a manipulative woman, preventing her son from a life of wealth. Unbeknownst to her, Mai Pung had a grandfather, a tycoon wealthy enough to rival anyone. Elsewhere, Shine, now a wealthy wife, overheard a conversation between the house staff and learned that Mr. Kim was searching for a lost ring, a memento from a missing loved one. Seeking his favor, Shine began searching for the ring and, to her surprise, found it. Mr. Kim was overjoyed and expressed his gratitude. In a twist of fate, just as Mr. Kim recovered his ring, a private investigator he'd hired arrived with the news. His son had died while on the run. Fortunately, his granddaughter was still alive, though the investigator only knew her name, Kim Mai Pung. Shine, eavesdropping outside the door, overheard this. Recalling a photo her husband had once shown her, she was stunned and terrified. Could Mai Pung be the missing granddaughter Mr. Kim had been searching for? Despite her new status, Shine continued to suffer abuse at the hands of her mother-in-law. The commotion attracted Hee Dong's attention, and he went to investigate. When he tried to enter his mother's room to check on her, he found it locked. Mrs. Chung Jia claimed she was simply tired and needed to rest. After Hee Dong left, Shine begged for forgiveness, but Mrs. Chung Jia showed no mercy, continuing her abuse. Mrs. Chung Jia's cruelty stemmed from a secret she'd discovered. A few days earlier, Shine's aunt, learning of her niece's advantageous marriage, had shown up demanding money. It turned out Shine had a daughter who had been raised by her aunt. To protect her secret, Shine paid her aunt off, fearing her in-laws would reject her if they knew she was a North Korean defector. Unfortunately, Mrs. Chung Jia overheard their conversation. Unable to accept this deception, Mrs. Chung Jia locked herself in her room. Shine banged on the door, begging for another chance, but was met with a bucket of cold water thrown in her face. Mrs. Chung Jia, worried about the impact on her son, decided to keep the secret for now, but she intensified her efforts to drive Shine out of the house. On the verge of a breakdown, Shine suddenly remembered Mr. Kim's search for his missing relatives. She noticed Mai Pung's mother seemed to be wearing a ring similar to Mr. Kim's. To confirm her suspicion, Shine visited Mai Pung's mother, feigning remorse while surreptitiously examining the ring. Seeing an inscription, she became convinced that Mai Pung and her mother were the relatives Mr. Kim was searching for. With her dreams of a luxurious life fading, Shine's demeanor changed. She stopped tolerating her mother-in-law's abuse and lashed out, asking what right Mrs. Chung Jia had to treat her so poorly, especially since she wasn't living there for free. After venting her frustrations, she went upstairs to pack, preparing to leave. She had married Hee Dong believing he would inherit the family fortune, but now that she knew otherwise, she had no reason to stay. However, she devised a plan. If she could help Mr. Kim find his granddaughter, she would receive a hefty reward. She stole Mr. Kim's toothbrush and then visited Mai Pung and her mother, feigning distress to gain their sympathy. Under the guise of using the restroom, she stole Mai Pung's toothbrush. At the DNA testing center, she was informed that Mr. Kim and Mai Pung's DNA couldn't be compared. They needed a male relative's DNA. Disappointed, Shine left. A sinister idea then took root. If DNA couldn't confirm the relationship, anyone could be the granddaughter. She decided to steal Mai Pung's mother's ring and claimed to be the missing relative. However, when she returned to Mai Pung's house, she ran into Hee Ra. Hee Ra had overheard Shine's earlier conversation with Mai Pung's mother and had confirmed the truth with her own mother. Knowing Shine had deceived her brother, Hee Ra attacked her. Mai Pung's mother intervened, saving Shine from further harm. That evening, Shine followed Mai Pung's mother to a park. When no one was around, she attacked her and stole the ring. In her haste, she dropped it down a storm drain. While trying to retrieve it, she noticed two students approaching and hid. Fearing discovery, Mai Pung's mother was found and rushed to the hospital. When she awoke, she realized her ring was missing. Mai Pung and Django immediately returned to the scene to search for it. At that moment, Shine also returned to the park, intending to retrieve the ring. Hearing Django and Mai Pung approaching, she quickly hid. After searching unsuccessfully, they left. Shine grabbed the ring and hurried away, determined to secure her place in the wealthy family. she decided to impersonate Mr. Kim's granddaughter. She knelt before him, tearfully confessing to being a North Korean defector. Mr. Kim was furious. Before he could react, Shin-ae strategically revealed the ring she'd stolen. This caught his attention. Recognizing the ring, he realized she was his granddaughter. Overwhelmed with joy, he fainted. When he awoke, he clutched Shin-ae's hand. She embraced him, sobbing dramatically. Feeling indebted to his long-lost granddaughter, Mr. Kim promised her a life of luxury and declared her his sole heir. Shin-ae barely contained her glee. However, Mrs. Chung-ja, who had always coveted Mr. Kim's fortune, was suspicious. She couldn't understand how he could believe Shin-ae based on a single ring. To expose her deception, she suggested a DNA test during a family dinner. Mr. Kim warned her that such distrust would hurt Shin-ae. However, Shin-ae didn't object, having learned beforehand that the doctor wouldn't be able to confirm a blood relationship between them. Hearing this, Mrs. Chung-ja panicked and asked about alternative tests. But Mr. Kim was convinced Shin-ae was his granddaughter. Back home, Mr. Kim warned Mrs. Chung-ja that if she questioned Shin-ae's identity again, he would kick her out. Mrs. Chung-ja, unable to accept this, pulled her husband aside and urged him to tell their son the truth, since Shin-ae was Mr. Kim's granddaughter. They couldn't get married. However, her husband revealed a shocking truth. While Hee-dong was their biological son, he and Mr. Kim were not biological brothers. This meant Hee-dong wasn't related to Mr. Kim and could still marry Shin-ae. Now a wealthy heiress, Shin-ae's newfound bliss was shattered when her aunt arrived with her illegitimate daughter. To avoid exposure, Shin-ae tried to hustle them away, but Mr. Kim returned just then. Panicked, Shin-ae claimed the woman had helped her during difficult times. Grateful, Mr. Kim invited them in. He praised Shin-ae for overcoming hardship, mentioning her aunt's care. Shin-ae's aunt was stunned. How had her niece, a wealthy wife, suddenly become Mr. Kim's granddaughter? She realized Shin-ae was impersonating someone. However, she remained silent, hoping to extort more money. Once outside, Shin-ae handed her aunt a wad of cash, claiming all of Mr. Kim's real relatives were dead, and she was his only remaining heir. This not only gave Mr. Kim a renewed will to live, but also secured a comfortable life for Shin-ae's aunt. Deep in debt, she didn't care about the details, as long as she had money. Before leaving, her daughter stared longingly at Shin-ae. But Shin-ae hardened her heart. If Mr. Kim discovered her deception and the existence of her child, the consequences would be dire. Meanwhile, Nam-yi, unable to bear losing Jang-go to Mi-pung, called her and demanded they meet at a bar. Worried about Nam-yi causing trouble, Jang-go went to the bar instead. A drunk Nam-yi berated Jang-go, asking what Mi-pung had that she didn't. As she stumbled away, Jang-go tried to help her, but she pushed him off, vowing never to forgive him. Moments later, she was hit by a car. Jang-go rushed her to the hospital. While her injuries weren't life-threatening, the impact had damaged nerves in her lower back, potentially paralyzing her legs. Nam-yi's father, enraged, grabbed Jang-go, threatening him if anything happened to his daughter. Jang-go's mother, ever unreasonable, blamed Mi-pung. Kind-hearted Mi-pung blamed herself for letting Jang-go go in her place. While buying flowers for Nam-yi, she overheard Jang-go's mother telling him that only he could give Nam-yi the will to live. Feeling responsible, Mi-pung met with Jang-go and, before he could speak, suggested they break up. Perhaps they were meant to meet, but not to be together. Nam-yi, desperate to keep Jang-go, feigned paralysis, forcing him to stay by her side. During their engagement party, Hee-ra accidentally knocks a candle onto Nam-yi's dress. Nam-yi jumped up in alarm, exposing her deception. Panicked, she looked to Jang-go's mother for help. But Jang-go, having lost all hope, walked out, ignoring their pleas to stay. After a day of reflection, Jang-go sought out Mi-pung, who had been hurt by both Nam-yi and his mother. He embraced her, apologizing for his past shortcomings, and proposed marriage, suggesting they move in together. Mi-pung, deeply in love, accepted. Jang-go's mother, furious, refused to give her blessing and locked herself in her room. Fortunately, his grandmother, more understanding, approved of the marriage and suggested they ask for Mi-pung's mother's blessing. Seeing their love, Mi-pung's mother agreed, wishing them happiness. Sung-sil, learning of Mi-pung's impending marriage, was heartbroken but maintained his composure, reinstating her to her previous position. Soon, their wedding day arrived. Mrs. Chung-ja attended with her son and daughter-in-law. Seeing Mi-pung as the bride, Shin-ae panicked, especially when Mi-pung playfully posed for a picture with her daughter. She pulled her aunt aside, warning her to stay away from Mi-pung or risk exposing her secret. Mrs. Chung-ja overheard this. Enraged, she lunged at Shin-ae, intending to tear her mask of deception away. But her age was no match for Shin-ae's strength. Regaining her composure, Mrs. Chung-ja prepared to tell Mr. Kim the truth. Shin-ae threatened and warned her that if Mr. Kim found his real granddaughter, they would all lose everything. They were in this together. As long as they kept the secret, Mr. Kim's fortune would eventually be theirs. Mrs. Chung-ja, after careful consideration, agreed to help maintain the deception. Upon returning home, they found Shin-ae's aunt talking to Mr. Kim. Fortunately, she hadn't revealed anything, focused solely on money. Shin-ae pulled her aunt aside to negotiate, but her aunt demanded $1 billion. Mrs. Chung-ja, terrified, tried to reason with her, but the aunt was unyielding, threatening to tell Mi-poong's mother everything if they didn't pay within a day. Panicked, they scraped together the money, only to witness the aunt being fatally struck by a truck. To secure her inheritance, Shin-ae cruelly abandoned her daughter at an orphanage, warning her never to reveal their relationship. One day, Shin-ae and Mr. Kim encountered Mi-poong, the real granddaughter. Fearing exposure, Shin-ae quickly introduced Mr. Kim as her grandfather. However, Mr. Kim had met Mi-poong before. Mi-poong, unaware of their true connection, remained oblivious. Shin-ae, fearing further conversation, quickly pulled Mr. Kim away. Later, Mi-poong learned that the chairman was now Shin-ae's grandfather. She questioned how Shin-ae, an orphan, could suddenly have a grandfather. As she pondered this, Shin-ae became her direct supervisor. Mr. Kim, wanting to mentor his granddaughter, went to see Shin-ae but collapsed. Mi-poong, witnessing this, rushed to his aid and performed CPR, saving his life. Mr. Kim, unaware of what had happened, was told that a female employee had saved him. Grateful, he arranged a dinner to thank her. Shin-ae was unaware of this. When the doorbell rang, Mi-poong arrived with flowers. Shin-ae and Mrs. Chung-ja were terrified. During dinner, as Mi-poong and Mr. Kim reminisced, Mrs. Chung-ja accidentally spilled water, interrupting them. After dinner, Mr. Kim invited Mi-poong to his study for a private conversation. A panicked Shin-ae used her ring to signal her mother-in-law. Mrs. Chung-ja rushed into the study and hid a framed photo of the ring. Mr. Kim offered Mi-poong a stack of cash as a reward, asking if she had any wishes he could fulfill. Mi-poong declined, saying saving him was simply the right thing to do. Mr. Kim then invited her to visit regularly. Just then, he noticed the missing photo. He immediately questioned everyone. Chung-ja and Shin-ae feigned ignorance and ushered Mi-poong out. Chung-ja then found the photo and hid it under a cushion. To get Mi-poong fired, Shin-ae bribed a truck driver to blame her for a missing shipment, a scheme riddled with holes. The next day, Jang Go reviewed security footage and noticed the driver had switched trucks mid-route. They tracked down the driver and confronted him with the evidence. The driver tried to flee, but Jang Go was ready and apprehended him. Meanwhile, Mr. Kim, also skeptical of Mi-poong's guilt, summoned Shin-ae and the driver to his office. Under questioning, the driver confessed, claiming he needed money for his sick child. Unmoved, Mr. Kim fired him and reprimanded Shin-ae for her careless handling of the situation. Shin-ae, humiliated, could only apologize. Later, Shin-ae seethed. This was the first time Mr. Kim had scolded her publicly. Remembering Mi-poong's cheerful departure, she vowed revenge. Meanwhile, Mi-poong and Jang Go went shopping. Hoping to ease the tension between her mother-in-law and herself, Mi-poong suggested buying her a gift. However, when Jang Go sent his mother pictures asking for her preference, she ignored him. To distract herself, Jang Go's mother went to the movies with a friend. They spotted Chung-ja's husband with Mi-poong's mother, seemingly on a date. Intrigued, they took pictures and sent them to Chung-ja. Shocked, Chung-ja demanded to know her husband's whereabouts and stormed into the theater, trying to catch them in the act. Theater staff intervened, threatening to call the police. Jang Go's mother restrained Chung-ja, urging her not to escalate the situation. After the movie, Chung-ja's husband drove Mi-poong's mother home. As the car stopped, Chung-ja attacked Mi-poong's mother, accusing her of seducing her husband. Chung-ja had envisioned a dignified confrontation, but instead, her husband pushed her away and scolded her publicly. Chung-ja was devastated that the man she'd loved for over 20 years was defending another woman. He took a fuming Chung-ja home. Expecting an explanation, Chung-ja was met with accusations instead. Furious, she showed him the pictures, accusing him of shamelessly dating his employee. He threw the phone down, enraged by her lack of trust. He gave her the ultimatum of divorce or separation and left. Meanwhile, Mi-poong endured her mother-in-law's wrath over the incident. Though unaware of the cause, she defended her mother, believing she would never intentionally hurt anyone. She humbly tried to explain unaware that her mother-in-law was the instigator. The next day, fueled by Shin-ae, Chung-ja decided to confront Mi-pung's mother. Arriving at the shop, Chung-ja, convinced that Mi-pung's mother was a homewrecker, prepared to attack. But Chung-ja's husband grabbed her arm, refusing to cause a scene in his workplace. His mother-in-law, however, was undeterred, loudly accusing him of seeing a mistress. Nearby staff, recognizing the misunderstanding, intervened, explaining the situation and showing a picture of the entire group at the movies. Both Chung-ja and her mother were mortified. Faced with their distrust, Chung-ja's husband was deeply hurt and wanted nothing more than to escape. Meanwhile, Jang-go's mother learned of the misunderstanding. However, to save face, she couldn't apologize directly. While Mi-pung was washing dishes, she offered a subtle apology. Surprised but relieved, Mi-pung accepted. Jang-go, believing this incident would improve their relationship, was unaware it was only the beginning of their troubles. Hee-dong, seeking inspiration for his comics, visited an orphanage. There, he met Chu-sin, Shin-ae's daughter, and was instantly captivated. He visited frequently, always seeking time alone with Chu-sin, even giving her his phone number. When Shin-ae visited her daughter, she saw her saying goodbye to Hee-dong. Panicked, she pulled Chu-sin aside, fearing exposure. Chu-sin reassured her that Hee-dong was just a new acquaintance, and she hadn't revealed their relationship. Shin-ae forbade her from seeing him again, and Chu-sin reluctantly agreed, wanting to maintain contact with her mother. Meanwhile, Hee-dong, wanting to improve the orphanage, convinced Mr. Kim to donate, a plan Mr. Kim had already been considering. Hee-dong took him to the orphanage for a photo opportunity with the children. Noticing Chu-sin's absence, Hee-dong realized she was avoiding him. He went to find her, and Mr. Kim followed. Recognizing Chu-sin as the daughter of Shin-ae's aunt, and learning she was now motherless, he decided to adopt her. Shin-ae was stunned to see her daughter at home, while Mr. Kim and Hee-dong seemed unperturbed. Maintaining her facade, she embraced Chu-sin, inquiring about her well-being. Mr. Kim explained to Shin-ae that Chu-sin had been abandoned at the orphanage, and he wanted to adopt her. Relieved, Shin-ae feigned support. The next day, Hee-dong enrolled Chu-sin in kindergarten. There, she met Yu-sung, Mi-pung's nephew. After school, Chu-sin, wanting Yu-sung to play at her house, asked Hee-dong to bring him along. Hee-dong was about to refuse when, to his surprise, Jang-go's mother arrived to pick up Yu-sung. After some negotiation, Chu-sin took Yu-sung home. They played house, even wearing rings from Mr. Kim's framed photo, but Chu-sin forgot to return the ring. Later, Shin-ae, wanting to reconnect with her daughter, went to hug her and noticed the ring on her finger. Panicked, she rushed to Mr. Kim's room, discovering one of the rings from the frame was missing. Chu-sin, unaware of the ring's significance, hadn't mentioned it. Shin-ae, though furious, hid her anger and told Chu-sin not to tell anyone. She then asked her mother-in-law for help, retrieving the ring discreetly. Mrs. Chung-ja, eager to maintain her share of the family fortune, agreed. At Mi-pung's house, Mrs. Chung-ja encountered Yu-sung alone. She questioned him about the ring. A frightened Yu-sung pointed to his discarded clothes. Shin-ae frantically searched the room, but couldn't find it. Frustrated, she threatened Yu-sung, telling him not to tell anyone or he'd be arrested. Terrified, he agreed. Unbeknownst to them, the ring had fallen into a crack in the floor. Meanwhile, Mr. Kim discovered the missing ring and summoned Chung-ja and Shin-ae. Coached by Shin-ae, Chung-ja confessed to accidentally throwing it away while cleaning the frame. They both begged for forgiveness. Mr. Kim scolded them, but took no further action. The next day, Shin-ae, taking her daughter to school, encountered Mi-pung and Yu-sung. Fearing exposure, she subtly questioned Mi-pung, but seeing no reaction, she relaxed. However, she still harbored resentment. At work, she orchestrated a meeting and appointed Mi-pung as head of a new product development team, announcing it company-wide. While everyone congratulated Mi-pung, they were unaware of Shin-ae's trap. Soon after, a competitor launched a product identical to their unreleased design. Mi-pung, now responsible, faced a lawsuit. The company's legal team launched an investigation and discovered a bag of money in Mi-pung's desk, suggesting bribery. She was taken for questioning, and the investigator was none other than Jang-go. Shin-ae rushed to Mr. Kim, claiming Mi-pung had accepted a bribe. In reality, Shin-ae had orchestrated the entire setup. She had planted the money and falsely accused Mi-pung of leaking company secrets. Mr. Kim, conflicted, found it hard to believe Mi-pung, who had saved his life, would do such a thing. Shin-ae, pressing her advantage, further slandered Mi-pung and her mother, falsely accusing them of petty theft and promiscuity. Trusting his Granddaughter. Mr. Kim fired Mi Poong. Mi Poong, now jobless and disgraced, faced eviction by her mother-in-law, who demanded a divorce. Mi Poong's mother, desperate to save her daughter's marriage, begged Jang-go's mother for mercy, even offering to accept punishment in her daughter's place. But Jang-go's mother, heartless, threw their belongings out. Mi Poong, witnessing this humiliation, decided to leave. She then arranged to meet Jang-go. Before Jang-go could speak, Mi Poong asked for a divorce. Jang-go was stunned. He urged her to reconsider, understanding her current difficulties. But Mi Poong, heartbroken by her mother-in-law's cruelty, explained that this wasn't the family she'd envisioned. For her mother's sake, she couldn't endure it any longer. She walked out, but Jang-go followed, offering to talk to his mother and asking for more time. Mi Poong refused, asking him to let her go. Helpless, Jang-go watched her leave. Desperate to win her back, he sought help from Mi Poong's mother. Though heartbroken for them, she agreed that divorce was the best option. The next day, they filed for divorce. Jang-go told Mi Poong he wanted her to be happy, which is why he was letting her go. She thanked him and left. He longed to embrace her, but it was too late. To survive, Mi Poong and her mother started a street food stall. Just as things seemed to be looking up, another vendor harassed them, demanding they leave. Mi Poong argued, but the woman overturned their stall and attacked her. Mi Poong's mother watched in horror, weeping. They were forced to leave, promising never to return. Later, Mi Poong's mother had a vivid dream of her deceased husband, urging her to use the ring to find his father. She awoke, clutching the ring. While moving, she'd rediscovered the long-lost ring. Yu-sung, seeing her joy, asked if it was hers. She confirmed it was the only way to find her father-in-law. Yu-sung vaguely remembered seeing the ring somewhere, but couldn't recall where. Determined to fulfill her husband's wish, she contacted a newspaper and published a picture of the ring, hoping to find her father-in-law. Shin-ae, still monitoring Mi Poong, saw the newspaper article and panicked. She contacted her mother-in-law, asking if the newspaper had been delivered, and urging her to check on Mr. Kim. Fortunately, Cheung-ja found the newspaper in Mr. Kim's study, just as he returned. Feigning innocence, she, accidentally, soaked the newspaper and took it away. Mi Poong and her mother received a call about the ring, believing they'd found their long-lost relative. They were heartbroken when the man on the phone claimed he was already married with a family and wanted no contact, urging them not to involve the press. He hung up before they could explain. They wept, their hopes dashed. The next day, Shin-ae visited Mi Poong's mother, expressing regret for not being able to help her previously. Since Mr. Kim insisted on firing Mi Poong, there was nothing she could do. Mi Poong's mother accepted the situation, believing they would overcome whatever challenges lay ahead. Then, Shin-ae revealed her reason for visiting. To atone for her past misdeeds, she offered to finance their move to America, even promising to help Mi Poong find a job. Given their current struggles, Mi Poong's mother was overwhelmed with gratitude. Since their failed attempt to find her father-in-law, they had lost hope. That evening, she excitedly shared the news with Mi Poong, who remained skeptical of Shin-ae's sudden generosity. However, her mother saw it as a fresh start. The next morning, while setting up her stall, Mi Poong's mother spotted her long-lost husband. Just as she thought she was hallucinating, he got into a car and drove away. Unbeknownst to them, Mi Poong's father was alive, but had only memories up to the age of 10. A private investigator had brought him to Mr. Kim, suspecting a familial connection and wanting a DNA test. When Mr. Kim asked for his mother's name, Mi Poong's father answered correctly. Mr. Kim was deeply moved. Learning his son had amnesia due to a gunshot wound, he arranged for a DNA test. The results confirmed their relationship, bringing Mr. Kim to tears. He finally had his son back. He brought him home and announced the joyous news to the family. Shin-ae, entering the house, was stunned to see her foster father alive. She immediately launched into a dramatic display of affection, tearfully embracing him. That night, Mi Poong's father experienced a flashback, briefly regaining his memory. He questioned Shin-ae about his wife and daughter and why she was calling him father. But the flashback was short-lived, and he reverted to his 10-year-old mindset. A terrified Shin-ae feared her plans would unravel. The next day, she arranged for someone to take Mi Poong's father away. Just as she thought she'd eliminated the threat, he escaped. Mr. Kim was distraught. He and Shin-ae went to the police, but were told to wait, as not enough time had passed since his disappearance. Mr. Kim fell ill with worry. Shin-ae reassured him that her father was just having fun, and the police would find him. Mr. Kim believed her, unaware she was the cause of his distress. Unbeknownst to Shin-ae, Mi Poong's father had evaded capture. He encountered a stranger outside a supermarket. Recognizing his mental state, the stranger lured him to a farm. and forced him to work long hours. Desperate for food, he complied. However, thugs tracked him down. Terrified, he fled the farm. With the help of a kind stranger, he finally boarded a bus back to the city. But upon arrival, overwhelmed by the towering buildings and possessing only the mental capacity of a 10-year-old, he was utterly lost. He wandered aimlessly for who knows how long, until, as if guided by an unseen force, he found himself standing before the newly opened dumpling shop, owned by Mi Pung and her mother. Inside, the mother and daughter, busily preparing their wares, were completely unaware that the man they'd longed for was just outside the door. Driven by days of hunger, his eyes fixated on the steaming dumplings. In a moment of desperation, he opened the window and snatched a handful. Mi Pung, catching him in the act, was stunned. She couldn't believe that her father, presumed dead for years, was actually alive. But as she rushed out to confront him, he panicked and fled, disappearing around a corner. The next day, police found Mi Pung's father wandering the streets. Upon receiving the news, Mr. Kim rushed to the police station. The emotional reunion brought both father and son to tears as they embraced, overwhelmed with joy and relief. Meanwhile, Shin-ae stood by, seething with barely concealed rage. She had never imagined that Mi Pung's father would ever return. Back home, Mr. Kim, terrified of losing his son again, insisted they sleep together. Before drifting off, Mr. Kim confessed to his son that he wouldn't want to live if he lost him again. Touched by his father's words, Mi Pung's father confided in him, expressing his unease about Shin-ae. He felt she wasn't truly his daughter. No matter what he did, her reactions were cold and distant. His words planted a seed of doubt in Mr. Kim's mind. Later that night, after his son had fallen asleep, Mr. Kim slipped into his grandson's room and asked him to discreetly arrange a DNA test for Mi Pung's father and Shin-ae. Unbeknownst to them, Chung-ja had overheard their entire conversation. Taking advantage of the family's absence the following day, she snuck into the house and stole Shin-ae's toothbrush. When his grandson presented him with the DNA results, Mr. Kim's suspicions were confirmed, and he was filled with remorse for how he had treated Shin-ae. Meanwhile, Mi Pung had been tirelessly distributing missing person posters and even helping the homeless under bridges. Perhaps it was karma, but Mi Pung's father, while playing with Chu Sin, stumbled upon one of the missing person flyers. Recognizing himself, he excitedly brought it to Shin-ae and Chung-ja. Upon seeing the poster, they immediately agreed to keep it a secret from Mi Pung's father. However, the previous incident had made Mr. Kim wary, so Shin-ae had to devise another way to silence him. She offered to take Mi Pung's father to the dumpling shop to apologize, but instead, she drove him to the outskirts of town. After they got out of the car, Shin-ae pointed him in a random direction, falsely claiming it was the dumpling shop. As she watched his figure recede into the distance, she waited for a while before calling Mr. Kim, claiming her father had suddenly become ill and run off in a delusional state. Upon hearing this, Mr. Kim abruptly hung up and rushed out to search for him. Meanwhile, Shin-ae also called Chung-ja, instructing her to remove all the missing person posters from the house. Then, she caught up with her father, feigning concern and comfort. Grateful for her supposed kindness, Mi Pung's father sincerely apologized, promising not to cause her any more trouble. When they returned home, Mr. Kim angrily berated his son for wandering off. But Mi Pung's father explained that he'd become agitated after seeing the missing person posters. This piqued Mr. Kim's suspicion. He questioned Shin-ae, who smoothly attributed her father's behavior to his illness, and suggested he was talking nonsense. To corroborate her story, Mi Pung's father rushed inside to find the missing person poster and show it to his father. However, the missing person posters had long been replaced with a different image, by Chung-ja. When Mi Pung's father saw the looks of confusion and suspicion from his family, he felt the sting of being wrongly accused, like a child unjustly punished. He had remembered a ring being on the poster, so why was it something different now? Frustration and hurt welled up inside him, erupting in an outburst of anger. Deeply concerned, Mr. Kim decided to take his son for a medical evaluation. The next day, Shin-ae accompanied Mi Pung's father to the hospital. The doctor explained that he had suffered a minor brain injury, and occasional outbursts were to be expected. However, after the appointment, Shin-ae privately requested a prescription for sedatives for her father, instructing him to take them daily. While she thought her actions went unnoticed, they aroused Mr. Kim's suspicions. Ever since his return from the hospital, Mi Pung's father had been perpetually drowsy. When Mr. Kim tried to rouse him, he'd simply lose consciousness. Alarmed, Mr. Kim rushed his son back to the hospital, recounting his recent lethargy. After listening carefully, the doctor confirmed that he had indeed prescribed the medication. but stressed that such severe side effects were only possible with an overdose. Mi-pung's father insisted he'd been taking the prescribed dosage daily. The doctor was taken aback. He reminded Mr. Kim that he had specifically instructed the accompanying family member, Shin-ae, that the medication should only be administered if the patient experienced a seizure. Mr. Kim was stunned, unable to believe his granddaughter would do such a thing. Furious, Mr. Kim confronted Shin-ae about her cruel treatment of her father. Seeing his stern expression, Shin-ae immediately feigned innocence and confusion, putting on a pitiful display. Taken in by her act, Mr. Kim's anger subsided. Desperate to maintain his good graces and secure her inheritance, Shin-ae went to great lengths to appear close to her father. She spent entire days with him, showering him with expensive gifts. She even sent photos of them together to Mr. Kim, creating a facade of a loving father-daughter relationship. One day, while playing with Chu-sin, Mi-pung's father was confided in by the little girl. She revealed that Shin-ae was in fact her mother, begging him to keep it a secret, fearing she'd be sent back to the orphanage if Shin-ae found out. Unfortunately, their conversation was overheard by Hee-dong. Seeing the look of shock and anger on his face, Chu-sin quickly backtracked, claiming she'd misspoken and pleading with him not to tell her mother. But the damage was done. No husband could easily dismiss such a revelation. After comforting Chu-sin, Hee-dong secretly obtained Shin-ae's toothbrush. The DNA test results left him devastated. He couldn't comprehend how the woman he loved could be so deceitful. He packed his bags, unable to bear living with such a dishonest wife. Shin-ae, sensing his distance, relentlessly pursued him for answers. Finally, he handed her the paternity test results. Shin-ae was filled with dread, realizing her secret was out. As she desperately tried to explain, he cut her off, refusing to hear any justifications. He stated that they would discuss the matter further when the divorce proceedings began. Overhearing their argument, Chung-ja, suspecting something was amiss, threatened suicide if they divorced. Hee-dong, torn, was forced to confess everything to his mother. When Shin-ae returned home, she was met by her furious mother-in-law, who couldn't accept her son being betrayed in such a way. But before Chung-ja could unleash her full wrath, Shin-ae shoved her to the ground, defiantly admitting that the child was indeed hers, but conceived before her marriage. She hadn't been unfaithful during their marriage. Chung-ja was almost speechless with shock. She berated Shin-ae for her shamelessness, for having a child out of wedlock, and then entrapping her son. Enraged, she vowed to reveal Shin-ae's true nature to Mr. Kim. At that moment, Mr. Kim, who had been standing just outside the door, overheard everything. Overcome with shock and grief, he collapsed. Meanwhile, Mi-pung and her mother, struggling to make ends meet, had opened a small dumpling shop. Just as they began to feel hopeful about their future, a group of thugs in black suits stormed in and trashed the place. They demanded that Mi-pung and her mother vacate the premises immediately. Jang Go, arriving just then, witnessed the scene and prepared to call the police. But the thugs turned on him, attacking both him and Mi-pung. To protect her, Jang Go shielded her with his own body, taking the brunt of the assault. Fortunately, his injuries weren't serious. Recovering in the hospital, Jang Go revealed to Mi-pung that Shin-ae was behind the attack, aiming to destroy their livelihood. Enraged, Mi-pung was determined to seek justice. The following day, she and her mother went to Shin-ae's company to protest. Seeing the commotion at the entrance, Mr. Kim started to investigate. However, Shin-ae intercepted him, claiming the protesters were dangerous and urging him to leave. She then went to her office and learned the reason behind the protest. When Mr. Kim later questioned her about the incident, Shin-ae lied, saying she was simply following his wishes to expand the company's business, and that Mi-pung and her mother were just trying to extort more money. Mr. Kim, completely deceived, believed her and saw Mi-pung and her mother as greedy opportunists. Despite this, he refused to approve Shin-ae's plans regarding the dumpling shop. Back in her office, Shin-ae seethed with rage. She cursed Mi-pung and her mother, railing against the injustice of it all. She vowed that even if it meant self-destruction, she would prevent Mi-pung from reclaiming her family. The next day, Mi-pung's dumpling shop reopened. As they prepared their dumplings, a woman approached them, introducing herself as a television producer. She praised their delicious dumplings and offered them a spot on a popular cooking show to promote their business. Mi-pung and her mother were ecstatic. After the woman left, Jang Go encouraged them to accept the offer, suggesting it could also be a way to reach a wider audience and potentially find their missing relative. Filled with renewed hope, Mi-pung and her mother believed this could be their chance to finally reunite with their father. Little did they know, it was a trap orchestrated by Shin-ae. Soon, Mi-pung and her mother made their television debut. Despite their initial nervousness, they performed well. Just as they were about to air their missing person announcement, the broadcast was abruptly cut short. The producer claimed a viewer had found insects in their dumplings and was demanding compensation. Mi-pung tried to explain, but the producer refused to listen. Returning home, they were met by an angry mob demanding refunds. Overwhelmed by the stress, Mi-pung's mother collapsed and was rushed to the hospital. With Mr. Kim still in a coma, Shin-ae seized control of the company. At the helm of a multi-billion-dollar corporation, she seemed to have finally achieved her ambition. As she began to handle Mr. Kim's pending business, she was shocked to discover the first document she received was a formal complaint accusing her of embezzlement. Furious, she immediately summoned Jang Go, the complainant, to her office and demanded his resignation. Jang Go questioned her authority to fire him. Shin-ae smugly declared that as the company's new president, she had the power to make personnel changes at will. Jang Go, recalling his embezzlement report, suggested her hasty reaction implied guilt. After work, Shin-ae visited the hospital to check on Mr. Kim. To her surprise, Mi-pung's father brought Yu-sung to visit Mr. Kim, having met the boy in the hospital hallway. Yu-sung innocently explained that his grandmother was sick, and he was there to help care for her. Upon seeing this, Chung-ja and Shin-ae berated and threatened Mi-pung's father, even suggesting they'd commit him to a mental institution if he didn't obey. They were oblivious to the fact that Mr. Kim had awakened from his coma. The next day, as Mi-pung's father sat by Mr. Kim's bedside, the old man suddenly began to speak. When everyone rushed to the room, Mr. Kim, wisely concealing the truth about the imposter granddaughter, simply observed Shin-ae's performance of concern. Once the others left, Mr. Kim confided in his grandson, revealing Shin-ae's deception. The grandson was stunned. He immediately wanted to confront his wife and mother, but Mr. Kim cautioned against revealing their knowledge just yet. He wanted to extract information about his real granddaughter's whereabouts from Shin-ae, silently vowing revenge against the manipulative woman. However, as the grandson left the room, he ran into his wife, Chung-ja, who had been complicit in Shin-ae's schemes. Overcome with anger, he slapped her, much to her shock, and stormed off. Confronted by Chung-ja's questions, he remained silent, leaving the room in a fury. Upon his discharge from the hospital, Mr. Kim immediately contacted his grandson. Together, they visited a private investigator. The investigator discovered that, besides contacting company employees, Shin-ae had been in frequent communication with Mi-pung and her mother. This sparked a new suspicion in Mr. Kim's mind. Could Mi-pung actually be his real granddaughter? To confirm his hunch, Mr. Kim and his grandson visited the public records office. There, they learned about Mi-pung's relentless search for her grandfather. When Mr. Kim saw the recorded video of his granddaughter's plea, he was overwhelmed with emotion, nearly fainting. He realized that the Mi-pung on the screen was his true granddaughter. Tears streamed down his face as the realization hit him. He had been deceived by Shin-ae and had unwittingly hurt his own flesh and blood. He vowed to find Mi-pung, even if it cost him his life. They immediately went to Mi-pung's former apartment, but the landlord informed them that she and her mother had been evicted and taken away by debt collectors. Back at the company, Mr. Kim ordered his lawyers to revoke Shin-ae's inheritance rights and launch an investigation into her embezzlement. He then reinstated Jang Go, instructing him to continue investigating the leak of Mi-pung's designs and to contact him immediately if he found any trace of Mi-pung. Meanwhile, Mi-pung and her mother were forced to work at a nightclub to repay their debts. Mi-pung, refusing to entertain customers, was subjected to brutal beatings by the debt collectors. Learning of Mr. Kim's search for Mi-pung, Shin-ae rushed to the nightclub. Feigning kindness, she informed them that she had found Mi-pung's father, claiming he had returned to their hometown to look for them. She offered to arrange transportation back to their hometown, seemingly a generous gesture, but in reality, a ploy to get rid of them. However, Shin-ae's actions were observed and photographed by Mr. Kim's private investigator, who immediately sent the evidence to Mr. Kim and his grandson. They raced to the nightclub. Mi-pung, suspicious of Shin-ae's sudden generosity, voiced her concerns to her mother. Just then, Yu-sung innocently revealed that he had seen a ring, identical to the one his grandmother had lost, and that Shin-ae and Chung-ja had threatened him with imprisonment if he told anyone. This revelation confirmed Mi-pung's suspicions that Shin-ae had attacked her mother in the park, stolen the ring, and used it to fabricate her connection to Mr. Kim. Determined to uncover the truth, they attempted to escape the nightclub, but were caught by the debt collectors. Fortunately, Mr. Kim and his security team arrived just in time to rescue them. As Mi-pung embraced her grandfather, Mr. Kim wept with remorse and relief. He couldn't fathom the suffering Mi-pung and her mother had endured, after being separated from their family. Determined to set things right, Mr. Kim took them to a restaurant, revealing that Mi-poong's father was safe at his home and exposing Shin-ae as an imposter. The truth stunned Mi-poong. Had Mr. Kim arrived any later, she and her mother would have been gone. Mr. Kim apologized profusely, and Mi-poong grasped his hand, understanding that he was perhaps the most heartbroken of all. Mr. Kim then brought them home, eager to reunite their family. However, as they arrived, they encountered Shin-ae at the gate. Seeing Mi-poong with Mr. Kim, she realized her deception had been uncovered. Panicked, she abruptly drove away with her daughter and Mi-poong's father. Inside the house, Chung-ja, seeing Mi-poong and her mother, knew her scheme had failed. She was stunned that they had actually found Mr. Kim. Mr. Kim furiously confronted Chung-ja, accusing her and Shin-ae of deceiving him and plotting to steal his fortune. Chung-ja immediately shifted the blame onto Shin-ae, claiming she had been coerced and manipulated. But her husband no longer believed her lies. He dragged her to the riverbank, threatening a double suicide. Finally realizing the depth of his anger, Chung-ja frantically apologized, promising to confess everything. But her husband had lost all faith in her. After urging her to turn herself in, he resolved to leave her for good. Meanwhile, Shin-ae, consumed with anxiety, couldn't understand how Mr. Kim had discovered the truth. Desperate, she called him, revealing that she had his son, and demanding that he drop all charges against her in exchange for his safe return. She also demanded 2 billion won and a plane ticket. Fearing for his son's safety, Mr. Kim agreed. Shin-ae drove her daughter to the airport, believing she could escape to a new life. However, while she was buying water, Mi-poong's father managed to slip away and take a taxi back to Mr. Kim's house. With no other options, Shin-ae sold her car, intending to use the money to flee the country with her daughter. After contacting a smuggler, she took her daughter to the coast. The smuggler demanded full payment up front. Reluctantly, Shin-ae agreed, but the smuggler never showed, and Shin-ae realized she'd been scammed. Left with nothing, she and her daughter were forced to take shelter under a bridge. Recognizing the dire situation, Chu-sin called Hee-dong, pleading for help and revealing Shin-ae's whereabouts. As soon as Hee-dong learned of their plight, he raced to the bridge. When Shin-ae woke up, she realized her daughter was gone and frantically searched for her. Relieved to find Chu-sin safe, Shin-ae warned her not to wander off. As she prepared to leave, Chu-sin hesitated. She confessed to calling Hee-dong for help. Shin-ae, realizing the danger of a wanted fugitive, grabbed her daughter's hand and fled. Just then, Hee-dong arrived. Hearing his voice, Shin-ae desperately clamped her hand over Chu-sin's mouth, preventing her from calling out. As Shin-ae's health deteriorated, Chu-sin was forced to scavenge for food alone. With no money, she resorted to stealing from a nearby store. She was caught. The shopkeeper chased her down. Chu-sin knelt on the ground, tears streaming down her face, begging for mercy, explaining that her mother was starving. Shin-ae witnessed the entire scene from afar. Her daughter's desperation broke her heart. She couldn't bear to see her child suffer any longer. She decided to take Chu-sin back to the orphanage. Promising to return for her, Shin-ae tearfully left her daughter. As Shin-ae walked away, Chu-sin knelt on the ground, screaming for her mother, clinging to the hope that she would return. After leaving Chu-sin at the orphanage, Shin-ae sought out Hee-dong, confessing that she had contemplated suicide but couldn't abandon her daughter. She was prepared to accept any punishment he deemed fit. Hee-dong, however, wanted nothing more to do with her and told her to leave. Desperate, Shin-ae then sought out Mi-poong and her mother, begging for forgiveness. At that moment, the police arrived and arrested her on multiple charges. She was sentenced to 10 years in prison. To her surprise, she found Chung-ja, her mother-in-law, already incarcerated, who promptly attacked her. When Jang-go's mother learned that Mi-poong was the granddaughter of the wealthy Kim family, she was filled with regret. She vowed not to interfere in her son's life again. Mi-poong and Jang-go reunited, eventually marrying and having a beautiful child. Their family lived happily ever after.